bring in senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of When China Attacks, Colonel Grant Newsham. And right there, on cue again, the President of the United States at 5:10 p.m. Tokyo time, 4:10 a.m. our time, walking down the steps, ready to greet the leaders there in Tokyo. And as we await the president's huge week in Asia, how can Trump use this first face-to-face with the Japanese prime minister to navigate, obviously, the thorny issue of tariffs while reassuring that prime minister of our commitment to remain a bulwark to China?
Well, this meeting actually is very important for setting the tone for subsequent meetings here, because as you stated, the Japanese and the Americans have an alliance that really underpins the American presence, I'd say the free world's presence in Asia. And this is his first meeting with Prime Minister Takaichi. And it's good that they get off on the right foot, and I think they will. The Japanese are doing more for their own defense than they've ever done. They're increasing spending, and they understand that they need to do something about the trade relationship. So I expect the Japanese are going to announce that they're going to buy a whole lot of American energy, maybe American soybeans. As for the F-150s, I don't know about that.
Yeah, you know, Colonel, East Asia is not an area of the world that is top of mind for Americans on a day-to-day basis. So what could this trip mean for us back here at home?
Well, actually, East Asia is of great importance to the United States. It probably should be at the top of the mind because we've got China, which is out to dominate us, ultimately out to destroy us. Xi Jinping has actually said, one of these two systems is going to survive, and it's not going to be ours. So this meeting and this good relationship that if we can get it started with the Japanese and with some other countries here, is going to very much affect people in the United States. The Chinese have been very clear about their intentions. They always telegraph their punches, and it is an adversarial relationship. Maybe we don't recognize it now, but we will soon enough.
Let's get some specifics on that point, Colonel. What is Xi Jinping watching for specifically in this meeting, in this week of talks, while President Trump is over there, specifically today's talks with the Prime Minister of Japan?
Well, the Chinese are always gauging will, and in this case, it's the will to defend ourselves. And as I said, the Japanese-U.S. alliance is essential. The United States would be very hard-pressed on its own to defend its interests, to defend its presence in the Asia-Pacific without Japan. And the Japanese bases and the Japanese Defense Force itself is immensely important, thus it needs to get better. Japanese economic power in the region, Japanese political influence is immensely important. And if that is solidly aligned, it presents the Chinese communists with a very serious problem. It's how do you split that? How do you deal with that? And if the US and Japan are solidly aligned, you'll find some other countries want to get in on that as well. So from China's perspective, they want to see their adversaries split apart, fussing with each other. And when they do look like they're getting along, it causes them a lot of trouble. And it's not just militarily, it's also economically, politically, psychologically. So this start in Japan is very important.
We just watched President Trump get off Air Force One and board Marine One, where he's going to fly to the Imperial Palace to meet with the Japanese Emperor. So we will bring you those images of the president's meeting with the Emperor when we get them. And when it comes to President Trump's meeting, Colonel, with the Japanese Prime Minister tomorrow, it's obviously going to be very important for her. She is very newly elected, just entered office last week, and she's the first female Prime Minister of the country. And the obvious discussion is going to be over trade, but the issue of Taiwan independence could also be a major focal point because no one has deeper ties to Taiwan than Japan, given the proximity 70 miles away. Do you think that the new prime minister will press Trump on defending Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack? Do you think that that conversation will come up?
Well, it could come up. Japan is well aware of the importance of Taiwan, but oddly enough, they have almost no defense relationship with the Taiwanese. Their economic relationship does exist, but the Japanese have actually almost ignored Taiwan when it comes to actually doing concrete things. And it's the Americans who are probably trying to get a commitment from the Japanese that in the event of something happening over Taiwan, the Japanese will be with us. The new Prime Minister Takaichi herself understands the importance of Taiwan. I think she would like to do more. So if there is a meeting of the minds, even implicitly, over Taiwan, it would be a very useful step, because America obviously would have a hard time defending Taiwan without Japan's full involvement in that. So that is an issue. Takaichi is aware of it. Wouldn't be surprised if it comes up, though it may not be the main topic that they talk about.
The war in Ukraine is also going to be a major topic throughout the course of this trip. The focus, of course, being how much pressure President Trump can put on Xi Jinping with regard to stopping his assistance to Russia, but also the Japanese buy a lot of LNG from Russia, fueling and funding that war effort in part in Ukraine. Can Trump get him to stop, do you think, Colonel, as we watch Marine One taxi and about to take off?
Well, he can try. I'm not sure he'll have much success, but the Japanese have actually been reducing the amount of LNG that they've been buying from the Russians. It is an issue, but I think the bigger question is going to be the energy that the Chinese and the Indians buy from the Russians. But the Japanese do see Ukraine as instructive. They realize that if there is a problem with Taiwan, Japan is going to have to play a role, somewhat akin, say, to what Poland is playing in the defense of Ukraine.
And we just heard from Peter, who's on the ground in Tokyo with the president, that when he was on Air Force One, he said that he is open to meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Do you anticipate that happening?
Well, there's nothing that Mr. Trump does that would surprise me.
Right.
Yeah, I would actually make a small bet that something like that does happen. It would be a huge sort of logistical effort to arrange that meeting. But at this point, I don't think anyone should be surprised at anything that Mr. Trump accomplishes.
Secret Service often has some issues securing a golf course. Good luck securing the DMZ. I mean, best of luck with all that. I'm sure you're giving your team fits there, President Trump. Again, any moment now, Marine One will take off for what are very crucial meetings. First Emperor, then Prime Minister. Is there a pitfall that you're worried about, either in the Japanese meetings or in the week entirely? Is there something that you're concerned about that gives you a little pit in your stomach as something that could go wrong?
Well, it's a couple things. One of them is the president's meetings with the president of South Korea, Lee Jae-myung. If the focus is just on Korean investment and the trade relations, well, that's important. It does need to be addressed. But what is often not recognized is that the president of South Korea has referred to American forces on the peninsula as an occupying force. The president of South Korea has also been implicated in sending about $6 million to North Korea when he was the governor of Gyeonggi province. He and some of his top associates are actually more pro-China, more pro-North Korea than they are pro-American. Hard to believe it hasn't gotten the attention it deserves. So how Mr. Trump deals with that is an open question. It does need to be addressed. Otherwise, it's sort of like ignoring a sore tooth, hoping that things get better. It won't unless these are addressed. But the bigger question, of course, is when President Trump meets Xi Jinping. It's very hard to see how they are going to reach any sort of lasting, wide-ranging commitment that's going to result in changed Chinese behavior. And you've got 30, 40 years of empirical evidence to suggest that China's going to try to do exactly what they want, and unless you can deal with them from really a position of incredible strength and also an uncompromising position, except for some modest agreements, it only made contingent on change in Chinese behavior. Unless you do that, you're going to come away disappointed. I think the most we can come up or hope for is a truce of some sort, temporary truce, because the Chinese are on the offensive. They're playing that rare earth card. The one concern I have is that somehow the United States, President Trump, gives up too much to get some sort of an agreement with the Chinese. If all he gets out of them is an agreement to buy American soybeans, or say to let us sort of buy TikTok, well, that's not much of an agreement, and something has to be done about fentanyl. It all comes from China. China could stop it, and it's killed 500,000 Americans since 2013. Also, if the question of Taiwan comes up, and the Chinese will try to raise it, or already have raised it, And if the Americans say, okay, well, we'll sort of ease off our support for Taiwan in exchange for you selling us rare earths, that would not be good. So I think, like everyone else, I'm curious to see what they actually agree to. But it's important that the U.S. side understands Chinese intentions, and I think they do, and I think Mr. Trump certainly does, and that they don't give up too much in hopes of sort of getting a feel-good agreement out of these meetings. But the relationship between Xi Jinping and Mr. Trump really needs to be looked at as the relationship between China, the People's Republic of China, Communist China, and the United States. And that is not a consensual, not a sort of a pleasant relationship, at least from one direction.
Yeah, well, the president got off one plane and boarded another, and then we watched him take off. We also watched nightfall in Tokyo, Japan. So our timing has been wonderful over the course of these past 20 minutes. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's going to be a very busy and pivotal week. So thank you so much for kicking things off for us, Colonel Grant Newsham. We appreciate it.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.